Well, good morning. Happy Father's Day again to everyone. My Father's Day gift today, some of you I know are going out to lunch, I'm sure, and going to family get-togethers and stuff. My Father's Day treat this afternoon is we get to go pick up my dog Rex. Yesterday we went to came back from the camping trip, and as we had two different routes to pick on coming back, and one was my daughter spent some time with her grandparents while we went camping, and so one way was convenient to pick up Jennifer, and if we went the other way, it was convenient to pick up Rex. So the choice was Rex or Jennifer, and so we did choose Jennifer. Just she is here today with us. So anyway. But it was great to go on the camping trip. As always, it's a wonderful time of fellowship. Get to spend time with my family, the church family, and the mosquito family. And so it was great. And in fact, I brought some new cologne I tried out. It's called Off. And this is the Deep Woods scent of cologne, Off. And here's the thing, it doesn't really work that well. So we got there to the camping trip, and we put on bracelets and stuff to kind of keep the mosquitoes away, and it was quite apparent the mosquitoes that are onto that bracelet thing. So they were finding ways to get through that. So then we decided to put on Off and stuff. And with me, when I put on Off, it's just like squirt, squirt, squirt. Jane, it's like all over, just put everything. So we're not much on the bug people and stuff. So with camping, when you go on a vacation, a lot of people, when they go on vacation, they want to increase the quality of their life for the time they go on vacation. So it's like you live in your normal life, and you have a house and a car and things like that, and you want to go on vacation, and so you want to go to Disney World, and that's cool, and so you stay in a place like where all the fun and stuff is, a nice hotel and everything, or you go to Colonial Williamsburg if you're a history buff like me. Or you go on a cruise and stuff. We got the Holy Land cruise people who always go on Holy Land cruise later on in the fall. Okay, we got that. So you go on nice places. With camping, what's interesting is with camping, you're intentionally downgrading your quality of life for a few days. And it's like you're going along, and it's like I have like all of us, we have a house with air conditioning. With the roof over the head and stuff like that, and windows, and the bugs are outside, normally, okay? But with camping, what you do is you say, no, we're going to get rid of the house, and instead we're going to have a tent, and we're going to get rid of the bed, and we get to sleep on the ground, okay? And so, or we get like a pump-up mattress and stuff, which works great until the air comes out of the mattress, You ever been like at nighttime and you're getting all relaxed? This happened to Jane, and there was a hole that it got in the mattress, and so all of a sudden it was like, so it goes out, and so and I just heard Jane say, oh, so bottom line is, then one night I decided that I was going to do some reading. I'm kind of a night owl and stuff, and so I wanted to do some reading, and so I wanted to do some reading away from the bugs. So I got in the van, and I sat in the van, and I was reading in the van. And so this is cool, all right? So my wife and son are going to bed early, and so I'm reading. And then I'm kind of trying to get my seat to go back and stuff some more. So I turn around, and the seat behind the passenger side seat was blocking the way. So I'm reaching over the back behind the seat, trying to pull the lever to get the seat to move back. It went the opposite direction. And it slammed into the bridge of my nose here and stuff. So, so good times. So, but the great thing about camping is in all seriousness, the fellowship. Because the thing is, I look at my life, and there's great experiences, and there are sermon illustrations, and so I get some great sermon illustrations when I go camping and stuff with the bugs. But the fellowship with the people was wonderful. And in all seriousness, we had one night, the night before last, gathered around the campfire, talking, cooking s'mores, and just singing. And we had the Christian music on, worship music on, and it was wonderful. It was awesome. And so in all seriousness, even though I'm not a big fan of bugs, I love hanging out with church people on the camping trip, and it's a lot of fun. And so I want to thank the Brays for just organizing it yet again, and just a wonderful camping trip. And they're here today. Unfortunately, they had the storm, is it Tropical Storm Bill? Is that Bill? Bill, Bob, whatever, Billy Bob, it came through, and it's kind of cut the camping trip short, sadly, but it was great just hanging out with church family and church friends, and the relaxed atmosphere, just wonderful. So thanks to the Braves for that, and for all of you that are able to go, and for the great experiences that we can have together. Today we're going to be looking at James chapter 1. In James chapter 1, we're going to look today at the second half of this chapter, but I wanted to kind of review a little bit with you. Because last week we talked about, or started this chapter, and here James is talking about going through trials and tribulations and what the purpose of those trials and tribulations for. And everyone here in this room can relate to the fact that we go through difficult times. And we all go through moments that we wish we didn't have to go through, experiences that we wish we didn't have to go through. We go through times of loss, death in the family, health issues, health crisis, financial issues, things like that. We all go through times of deprivation or times of difficulty. And all of our hearts, for example, right now go out to the folks at Charleston AME Church for what they're going through right now and their families. We live in a fallen world, and in this fallen world there will be difficulties. And the Bible, at no time does the Bible exempt Christians from those difficulties. In fact, Jesus makes it clear that it rains on the just and on the unjust. And so a lot of times people will go into Christianity, they'll accept Christ, they'll start doing this Christian thing, and they think that it's life's, we're going to live happily ever after at this point. And nothing bad's going to happen. And as long as I'm a good person, and as long as I do the right thing, as long as I, whatever, then everything's going to be great, and everything's going to be fine. That is not what the Bible promises. The Bible promises that even those who serve the Lord faithfully will go through difficult times. We live in a fallen world right now, and we must learn to endure. But the book of James holds out a promise where those that endure, those who endure and maintain their faith and their joy will inherit the crown of life. And that is what we are going to look at today, finish our look at today in a two-part series. And so in James chapter 1, I'm just going to kind of read through this and quickly review the first few verses, and then we'll dive into the latter part of this passage. James, a bondservant of God and of the Lord Jesus Christ, to the 12 tribes which are scattered abroad, greetings. Note that here we saw last week the importance of identity. And how do you see yourself? If you look at life as I want to get out of life everything that I can possibly get out of it, and you see yourself as life being all about you, then every time you hit a difficult spot, you're going to be upset and unhappy because something's been taken away from you. But James enters life seeing himself as a bondservant of Jesus Christ. Perspective, identity are critical in how you enter into difficult times. Verse 2, my brethren, count it all joy when you fall into various trials. A trial is an examination. It's a difficult time, a challenge that we go through, some kind of a misfortune or sad time or difficult time, painful time. But in all cases, it represents a time of testing. And this trial is a time of examination to determine whether our faith is real or whether it's not real. Our instinct is, of course, to recoil, to get angry, to lash out at God, to lash out at life. But yet we see here James is saying it's really an examination of our faith to see if we're the genuine thing, the real deal or not. Verse 3, knowing that the testing of your faith produces patience. As we saw last week, the reality of patience is that you just don't get the gift of patience. You just don't, wake up one day, wow, I have patience, And it's not where you accept Christ and just instantly, I have patience. The only way to get patience is to have that muscle exercised. The only way to get patience is to go through difficulties and earn patience that way, the hard way. And we must let patience, verse 4, have its perfect work, that you may be perfect, and complete, lacking nothing. If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all liberally and without reproach, and it will be given to him. But let him ask in faith, with no doubting. For he who doubts is like the wave of a sea driven and tossed by the wind. Faith is trust. And when we ask God for things, when we approach the throne of God, we must do so in worship, adoration, and faith. We must choose to trust God. If we instead approach God in a spirit of doubt and not of faith, in verse 7, James writes, "For let not that man suppose that he will receive anything from the Lord. He is a double-minded man, unstable in all his ways." Our goal and our desire should be to be stable and to have the peace and the joy that does not depend on circumstances. And so today we look at the remaining verses here, verses 9 through 12 in our passage, and we'll dive in and explore what James here is saying. Verse 9, "Let the lowly brother glory in his exaltation, but the rich in his humiliation, because as a flower of the field he will pass away." Here James's focus is on money and possessions. And it may seem unrelated here, but the fact of the matter is people often look for happiness in their stuff and in their security. Or they look for stuff to give them security. And so I want to broaden this out a little bit, and I want you to think of this not just in terms of your possessions, but think of it in terms of your circumstances. When life is going well, when all of your circumstances are cooperating, when everything in your house is working and you've got a house and you're not worried about the mortgage and everything is secure and you've got plenty of food on the table and everything is happy and you're getting along with everyone in your life just fine, when the money is no concern, when there really is no anxiety or no stress, you can be sure of one thing. This too will pass, all right? All right? There will come a point when things will not quite work like that. And if you are basing your happiness on your circumstances, and listen to me carefully on this, if your happiness is based on your circumstances, you will not be a consistently happy person. No matter how hard you try to maintain quality of circumstances, it will not work. It will not work. You know, and I'm going to use the camping illustration again here with bugs and stuff. You know, and I'm not a really big fan of bugs. Is anyone here a fan of bugs? Anyone? Okay. All right. All right. Now, I had a little bit of fun earlier, but the truth of the matter is I really did enjoy hanging out with my church family on the camping trip. I really did. It's a blast. I enjoy hanging out with the church family and just getting away from the hustle and bustle of life and everything like that. But if I put my whole focus on the bugs and not on the joy of the camping trip, I would have been a miserable person. Because let me tell you, those bugs will find a way to get to you, all right? And it's not just when you might be able to repel the mosquitoes. There are other bugs out there, all right? And the mosquitoes are like, okay, you think you got rid of us. Our friends are going to come get you now, you know. And I really do believe it's a conspiracy. I really do, a bug conspiracy. I had a bracelet, for example, one of those bracelets supposed to keep bugs and insects away on my ankle. That same ankle has tons of bug bites on it right now, all right? And they got in, they zeroed in. But there's not just the mosquitoes, there's beetles, there's all kinds of, there's little gnats and stuff. You know the gnats that kind of dangle right in front of you? They kind of zzz. It's like they're daring you. I'm going to get you. I'm going to get you. And then there are bugs called no-see-ums. All right? Now, I am absolutely convinced that no-see-ums came about after the fall of man. I'm convinced, all right? Because God could not possibly make no-see-ums, you know. I don't like no-see-ums. I want them to be no-existums, you know. It's like no existence at all. But the fact of the matter is, those bugs, you go out and you camp or go outside on a picnic or whatever, the bugs are coming for you, all right? And so you can choose to focus on the bugs, or you can choose to focus on the joy. Now, in life, and there's a reason why they're called pests and gnats and all that, because we're full of nuisances in life, are we not? In fact, we can be our own worst nuisance sometimes. You know, we can cause problems ourselves. So you can choose to focus on the things that bug you, or you can choose to focus on the things that make you happy. And that's the choice that you have to make throughout the Christian life here. And if you choose to ride the waves of circumstance, then know that no matter how hard you try, the bugs, metaphorically and literally, are still going to get you. At some point, your life, you may have everything in perfect harmony, but at some point, something's going to happen. You know, the old joke, the way to make God laugh is to make a plan, okay? And I do believe that planning is a good thing, and I do believe we should make plans, but never make a plan with the intention or with the expectation that you don't need God at that point. Because no matter how much you plan, you need God. Because there's no guarantee that your plan is going to work out as you plan. And your circumstances are not always going to be good. Here James is inverting things, because the natural tendency that we have in life is to think that if a person is poor, they're miserable and unhappy. And if a person is rich, they're happy and joyful. And James is reversing that, and what he's saying is, let the person who is poor glory in that. Be happy in that poverty. Let the person who is rich glory in humiliation. In other words, don't glory in your riches, because all glory is fleeting. All the circumstances, all the riches, everything that you possibly could want, it's fleeting. It goes away. You think about it when you guys were in high school. Some of you are still in high school right now. But in high school, there's, the kids' table that's like where the popular kids sit. You know what I'm talking about? I never sat at that table. But, the kid, where it's like the popular kids' table, okay? And it's like there's a tendency to kind of think, wow, those are the cool kids, and they're going to make it in life, and I'm not at the kids' table. That is just not the way it works. A lot of those kids that are at the cool kids' table are not doing too well in life right now. They're not. And a lot of those kids that did great on the ball field, and they were the superstars on the ball field, and everyone was cheering for them and everything, or on the ball court, or whatever sport it was that they were playing in, are not necessarily doing well right now in life. So the bottom line is things come and go. Life is like a wave. And James is saying, if you want to be the kind of Christian that gets tossed to and fro in the wave, then just glory in your circumstances. Be happy in your feelings and your circumstances, and then you'll just be tossed to and fro in the waves. Because that is what life is like. It comes in waves. And there will be times where the wave is up, and there will be times when the wave is down. There will be times when things are looking great, and there will be times when things don't look so great. And if you are focused on the waves, then ultimately you will sink in the waves as Peter did when he took his eyes off Jesus. We, ladies and gentlemen, must be able to walk on water, because we serve the Jesus, our Lord, who did walk on water. We serve the Lord who is above the waves. And if we keep our eyes on the one who is above the waves, then the waves will not affect our happiness and our joy and our faith. In verse 11, for no sooner has the sun risen with a burning heat than it withers the grass, its flower falls, and its beautiful appearance perishes. So the rich man also will fade away in his pursuits. You can conquer the world. You can conquer the world, and at the end, you will just be a footnote in history at best. If you really want to get depressed, I got a recommendation for you. All right. There's a philosopher by the name of William Lane Craig, and he wrote a long article that he's since turned into a book. It's a long essay. And basically, he talks about what the world would be like without God. And if God is not real, he said, this is what life is like. And he analyzes it from a philosophical standpoint, and it's absolutely depressing if you forget that God is real, okay? And he's a Christian, but what he basically does is, if God is not real, then nothing ultimately matters. Because if God is not real, and I'll give you the gist of it here, if God is not real, then there is no ultimate meaning or purpose in life. And if God is not real, then nothing ultimately lasts. Because science will tell you that this earth is eventually going to burn up. And the sun's going to be a heat giant and all that stuff. And so, don't worry, that's not going to happen tomorrow. It's like, quite a long ways down the road and stuff. But the bottom line is that, You know, we're born, we live, we die. There's that cycle of life and stuff. But if this is all there is, if this is it, then no matter what you can accomplish, at the end, you leave it all behind. Nothing that this earth has to offer is of lasting value. And you need to grasp that. You need to get that. And sometimes we, even as Christians, get caught up in the affairs of this world so much that we think that if we don't have the best of what the world has to offer, then we're not going to be happy, or our life's not worth living. Nothing could be further from the truth. This world is not our home. And it is because of what God offers us that we need not let our happiness and joy be tied to this world. We need to remember that what truly matters is what is eternal and what is lasting, and that's God himself. In verse 12, James brings this home, and he says, "Blessed is the man who endures temptation, for when he has been approved," think back to what we talked about with the trials, okay? The trials and the examinations. You pass that, you are approved. When he has been approved, he will receive the crown of life, which the Lord has promised to those who love him. Now, I'm not going to get into an analysis of the different crowns in heaven, okay? But what this is really, one of the things that the Greek audience would think of when they read what James is talking about here is in Greek Olympics, in the old ancient athletics, when a person would succeed in their Olympic event, when they would do their run or whatever, they would get like a wreath they would put on their head. It was like a crown, their crown. It was a crowning achievement that they won. And I believe this is the main thing that James is getting at, is we don't get just a little wreath, you know, that withers away and stuff. We get the crown of life. And the crown that the Lord offers us is a crown that, frankly, no reward on this earth can possibly compete with. I was reading this article the other day about the New England Patriots, and they were showing off their Super Bowl rings and stuff, you know. Now, I'm not a New England Patriots fan, I'm sorry, but they were, you know, one of the players was complaining about how hard it is to wear all their Super Bowl rings and stuff, you know, at the same time, you know. And, you know, too much bling, I guess, you know. And so I'm like, well, you know, I don't really feel sorry for you on that. So, but the bottom line is that Super Bowl ring, compared to the crown of life, isn't worth a nickel. Nothing this world has to offer is worth hearing, "Well done, good and faithful servant." Amen. Nothing this world has to offer. And so we're going to look and see. Let me back up for a second here. Look at that first word in verse number 12. I just want to make sure we get that, okay? James says, blessed, or blessed, if you want to get fancy, okay? But blessed is the man who endures temptation. Do you want to be blessed by God? Yes. Now, you know, if you answer no to that question, you might be in the wrong place, okay? But I'm assuming that all of us here today have a desire to be blessed. Now, when we think of blessing, sometimes other churches and preachers have a way of distorting this, but we think of monetary blessings. It could be that God may choose to bless you in ways that deal with your finances, and he has blessed many people with their finances. God may choose to bless you when health and things like that. But ultimately, what this is referring to really is happiness. And it's being happy in the presence of the Lord. Happy in the presence of the Lord to where you are basking in his favor and approval. Now, I want you to think about why people shop. And how many people here love to shop? All right, you like to shop, okay. Now, all right, and it's okay, you can hold your hand. I'm not gonna slam you, okay, all right? So we you know, a lot of us enjoy shopping, okay, all right? Now me, I'm not the kind of guy that just likes to love to walk meandering around and shop and stuff. I just want to go in, get what I'm going to get, and leave, okay? All right? How many of you are like that? You know, just go, get it, get out, okay? All right? In fact, I love the online shopping. I don't even have to go. It just comes, you know, so I just type it in. It gets shipped to me, you know, like that. Avoid the malls, avoid the crowds. I remember in the days before the internet, The kids are here thinking I must be old and ancient, but there were days before the internet where I actually had to go. I worked in retail, and I had to work in retail before the internet, and I worked at Fair Oaks Mall, and I worked at Fair Oaks in Sears, and then later in Brookstone, and this is back in my teenage years. And let me tell you something, Christmas shoppers are not cool people, okay? Especially then. And that, I mean, the place would be besieged, cars everywhere, people are mean, man. I mean, it's just, and when you're working retail, they don't treat you very well. But people that shop, they're buying stuff, and there's an expectation that when they buy that thing or that item, that it's going to bring them a measure of happiness. We buy we buy things for emotional reasons. Everyone understands this. Advertisers certainly understand this. When they show, for example, even commercials for little kids stuff, when you watch the cartoon channels and stuff like that. By the way, parents, those are conspiracy channels, because what they're doing is they're trying to get you to spend more of your money, okay? I understand that. Because your kids are watching all those commercials, and then they turn to you and they say, Mom, Dad, why can't you get me that stuff? Okay? Because they're appealing to the emotions of the kid. And then they appeal to the emotions of the parent, because no parent wants to say no to their kids, Stop. I got no problem saying no to my kids anyway, on that. But the bottom line is, they never show, they always show the kids playing with these great toys and having a blast. They never show kids fighting and arguing over these toys, which is the reality oftentimes, okay? All right, the bottom line is we buy for emotional reasons, and marketers appeal to people on emotional reasons. And the promise is you buy this thing or go on this vacation, this experience, or do this, and you will have happiness. All right, one of the most blatant examples of this is Coca-Cola, where it's a, drink happiness kind of thing. That's their motto. Now, I'm a huge Coca-Cola fan, okay? I love Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola is awesome, all right? Unlike that imitation Pepsi nonsense, Coca-Cola is the best, okay? All right? But the thing is, and certainly you can drink a Coke, and you can enjoy a moment of, that's great, But the fact of the matter is, you're not really drinking happiness, all right? You're drinking some health problems, but I know from experience on that. But you're not really drinking happiness. But the point is, calories and sugar and all kinds of stuff. But the point is that, okay, we get it. The point is that, I'm hearing my health experts down here, saying, yes, I know. All right. The point is that Coca-Cola is not the best for you, okay? But the point is, all these advertisers, they hold out this promise, get this stuff and you'll be happy. All of us have bought a lot of stuff over the years, and by now all of us should know that that's a lie. All of us should know by now that any happiness or any pleasure we get is short-term, it's temporary, that it's not a long-term sustainable kind of thing. You will not be able to get happiness long-term from stuff. And James is saying here that long-term, all that stuff's going to pass away. Now, the kind of blessing, though, that God promises us, and this is the cool thing, we search for happiness through stuff. God bypasses the middleman, which is the stuff, and he can just bring happiness directly to us. And he can do that because no one, listen to me on this, no one knows your heart and your needs and your wants better than God does. Amen. And God can take happiness and he can pour it right into you. And he can bathe you in happiness and joy, and where you won't need the circumstances and you won't need the stuff. Where you can be happy even if the circumstances around your life aren't looking too good right now. You can still be full of joy and happiness because you're full of the Lord. Amen. And that is what we need to be questing for and searching for, and that is what James is offering here. If you can endure the hardships of life, you will have the blessings of God. And that's what James is promising. So that's what ultimately it means to be blessed, and I want to ask you a question, and I want to have you answer this in the privacy of your own heart right now. Do you feel blessed? Are you happy right now in the Lord? Or are you chasing happiness where it cannot be found? Are you blessed? And how do you view trials and tribulations and temptations that come into your life? James would say that we should view them as opportunities to serve God. Opportunities to serve him and opportunities to be tested. How do you view trials? One scholar that I read said that we should see a trial as a literal conduit of God's blessing to us. A trial is nothing more than a vehicle through which God can bless us. And when it comes to trials and tribulations, what does it take to receive the blessings of God? And that is, we need to endure them. Now, I want to say two things on this point here. One, to endure a trial or a tribulation does not just mean that you do nothing. Certainly the Bible does tell us that there are times to wait on the Lord, and we should. But there's a couple things I want to say about things that we can do as we endure. And James addresses it here in this passage. One of the first things we need to do is check our perspective. Check our perspective. What's our identity? What are we doing this for? What's the purpose of it? Why are we doing what we're doing? This trial comes along, knocks us off course, starts to threaten our happiness. What's our perspective in that? And then we need to ask ourselves, is this trial something that really should ruin my day or get me upset? You know, there are a lot of things that upset us that really ultimately should not upset us. And there are a lot of trials and tribulations that we go through that when you take a second look at it, it's really not that big of a trial or a tribulation. It's really not that big of a deal. But we see it as a big deal because it gets magnified. And we're close to the situation. You know, this quote's been credited to both Harry Truman and Ronald Reagan, and you've heard it many times, but I'll say it again. But it's an example of our self-orientation. But basically, both Presidents Reagan and Truman, when they were asked what's the difference between a depression and a recession, and they said a recession is when your neighbor loses his job. A depression is when you lose yours. All right? And that is how we often will evaluate things based on how it affects us. But if instead you see yourself, as a servant of God, then anything that happens should be relativized. And when you adopt, if I can even get a little bit deeper than that for a second, when you adopt an eternal perspective on life, understand that no difficulty you're going through right now is going to last forever. There's going to be a stopping point. And that stopping point may be when you stop on this life and when you exit this life. But you know what? If that's the case, the Lord be praised. Because then you wake up in the presence of the Lord and there's no more pain and no more suffering. And so you think about for a second, if you can adopt an eternal perspective in life, it puts all the difficulties we go through in this life in perspective, in the appropriate perspective. Do you ever think for a second, there is nothing the devil can throw at you that can top what God can do for you? Nothing. Not in this life and certainly not in the next life. Nothing. The bottom line is, what is your perspective? And then, should you be upset about what it is that you're going through? Should it be the kind of thing that should be ruining your day? Should it be the kind of situation that could make you as miserable as you might be when you go through a trial and a tribulation? Examine yourself. Examine the situation. And then, when it comes to how do I handle the situation, this is important. James says, if you lack wisdom, ask God for wisdom. So, one of the first things that you need to do is pray and then ask God, Lord, please give me the wisdom to know how I should navigate through the situation, how I should handle the situation. Whenever, and know this gets back to perspective here, whenever you go through a difficult time or a situation, your main goal should not be, Lord, how do I get out of this? That may be your desire, and certainly let your request be made known to God. But I would hope that one of your other requests, if not the main request, should be, Lord, how can I glorify you in this situation? Because guess what? There are a lot of people who don't go to church. You know that. I'm sure you've got a lot of loved ones that you've been praying for, trying to get them to come to church. And they may not come to church, but they will look at you. And when they see you go through a difficult time or a difficult situation, do they see you glorifying the Lord? Do they see Jesus in you? Or do you react to a difficult time in a situation in the same way that they do? And if that's the case, What is the incentive for them to want to go to church and check out this Jesus fella that you say is so awesome? Do they see how awesome Jesus is when they look at your life? James says he's a bondservant of the Lord. And as we looked at last week, James, the writer of this, is the half-brother of Jesus. And if anyone had bragging rights, James would be in there. I mean, think about it. Yeah, he's my brother. James could brag about that, but he didn't. James does not identify himself as the brother of Jesus. James identifies himself as a servant of Jesus. And are you willing to have that perspective? I'm a servant of Jesus. And when I go through this difficult time, I'm going to serve him. And as you navigate through the difficult time and you're wondering how to handle this situation, you pray and you ask God for wisdom. And you can look in Proverbs, and it gives all kinds of advice on how to acquire more wisdom. It talks about wisdom in the multitude of counselors. When I go through a difficult time, it's great that I've got some godly men and women that I can turn to and get some wise counsel from them. By the way, Proverbs says there's safety in the multitude of counselors. It doesn't say there's safety in the multitude of opinions. And there is a difference. You can get opinions or a dime a dozen. You can get opinions from anyone. But are there people in your life that you can get wise, godly counsel from? And that's where the safety is. And so get the wisdom, certainly. Get the wisdom, get the understanding on how to navigate through and deal with these difficult times. But ultimately, you're called to endure. And as I think about endurance, and I want to close with this illustration of this story, and the praise band can come forward on this. But when I think about this, I think of the Battle of Gettysburg. Now, over here, Dwayne and looking at Dwayne and Capono, this family has been to Gettysburg numerous times. And they've seen the movie Gettysburg numerous times. In fact, when we had the men's retreat, we liked to show a movie, and Capono came to me and said, "Can we watch a movie without muskets, and stuff?" And because they've seen the Gettysburg a few times, so we did. We watched a movie that had machine guns in it, so it was good. But they've been to this. They've been to Little Round Top several times. And how many of you have been to Gettysburg Battlefield? Okay, how many of you have been to Little Round Top? Right. All right, those of you. So about half of you probably know the story of Little Round Top. And we talk about endurance. This is one of the best illustrations from history of endurance. On the second day of the Battle of Gettysburg, this is, of course, the three-day battle that cost the greatest number of casualties in American history. For a single battle, this was the bloodiest battle in American history ever fought on U.S. soil. And the Confederate Army had invaded the North and was threatening Washington, D.C. from above, and, of course, was disrupting supply lines and causing all kinds of problems, and the Union Army couldn't allow that, and so the Union Army moved to intercept the Confederate Army, and they end up meeting near a town called Gettysburg. Shortly after the initial day, the Union occupies the high ground. General Robert E. Lee orders the Southern Army to attack the Union on the high ground. At the extreme flank of the Union Army, and when I say the extreme flank, we're talking at the very end of the Union Army, and there's no one beyond it. At the very end of the Union Army, the Union Army puts a college professor. And this college professor by the name of Joshua Chamberlain. And he orders, his superior orders Chamberlain to hold this position until the last. And says, you cannot bend, you cannot leave, because if you do, the entire Union Army will collapse. The Confederates will come up, they'll sweep us off the hill, they'll then be able to attack us from the side. The entire battle will be lost. You must not give an inch. You cannot yield. In other words, he was telling him to endure. So, the Confederates then began to attack. They began to move up and attack the 20th Maine, which was Joshua Chamberlain's unit. Remember, Chamberlain is not a professional soldier. He's a professor, a college professor in literature and rhetoric. And yet now, this is back in the old days when they would often give political appointments and stuff to colonels and generals and things like that. So he's a professor of literature. He did a little bit of training, and he's up there now commanding this army of volunteers, this unit of volunteers. And he's commanding them, and the Confederates start attacking him with everything they've got. And after a while, he's losing more and more men, and they begin to run low on ammunition. And finally, his officers are coming to him and saying, Colonel, we don't have any more ammunition. We've already raided the dead for their ammunition. We've got no more ammunition to go. And here they're coming for another attack. And at this point, they're down to about 100 men that are able to stand, vastly outnumbered and in deep trouble. No ammunition. And when you're in a war and you don't have ammunition, it's a hard time to fight. So Chamberlain knows his orders. I can't retreat, and yet I can't stand and continue to fight. So Chamberlain orders a daring bayonet charge. He orders his men to fix bayonets. And normally, when you occupy the high ground, you wait for the enemy to come to you because you got all the advantages. But in this case, they can't shoot. So instead, what they do is they decide to charge downhill at the enemy. And they scared the Southern soldiers to death with this. And in fact, I've talked to a couple professional reenactors about this. In the Civil War, the bayonet was not often used in combat because there was kind of this fear of karma. If I don't want a bayonet used against me, so if I don't want it to be used against me, I'm not going to use it against my fellow soldier. So normally, when they fought hand-to-hand, they just fought with their fists or hands, or they used their rifles as clubs and that sort of thing. They didn't normally use the bayonet because it was a scary weapon. And if you get stabbed with a bayonet, it causes major problems. In fact, I knew a reenactor once that got stabbed accidentally with a bayonet, and it caused major problems for him. And even modern-day medicine, they had a hard time patching him up on that. But Chamberlain decides, I'm in desperate straits here. I cannot yield. I cannot give this ground. So no choice. And so he orders them to fix bayonets. And then you got a bunch of screaming Yankees with bayonets coming down the hill at the Confederates, and they're not expecting this. And so the Confederates then begin to surrender and turn around and run the other way, and it's a complete rout. And the 20th Maine literally saves the Union Army at Gettysburg. It's one of the most courageous and most incredible actions of bravery in the Civil War. As a result of that, Chamberlain later receives the Congressional Medal of Honor. It's the highest decoration ever awarded to a military man. Chamberlain would go on and finish out the war as a general, and in fact, at Appomattox, General Grant appoints Chamberlain to be the general that presides over the surrender of the Confederate Army at Appomattox Courthouse in 1865. But here's the cool thing about all this. I've just told you a story, and there's a whole lot more I could say, but I was giving you the bare highlights of one of the greatest examples of endurance. There will be times in your life where the enemy will be hitting you with everything he's got. There will be times in your life where you feel like you cannot take any more pain, that you cannot take any more difficulty, that you cannot take anything else going wrong in your life. And that's when the real women and men of God stand up and say, no, I'm going to endure. I'm not giving in to Satan. And my challenge to you is just as Colonel at the time, later General Chamberlain, said, no, I refuse to lose. Just as he did that, my challenge to you as a Christian, as a servant of the Most High God, refuse to lose to the enemy. Do not let the devil beat you. No matter how much the enemy can throw at you, you need to stand like Job did. And even if you've got nothing, you've still got God Almighty on your side. And if you've got to call a wild bayonet charge and charge into the teeth of Satan, you can at least say, greater is he that is in me than he that is in the world. Do not ever let Satan defeat you. Ever. The victory is ours. Let's bow for prayer. Father, Lord, many of us here are going through difficult times, Lord, in our life. We've gone through it before, we're going through it now, we'll be going through it in the future. Some people right now are going through a lot of pain at this present moment. Father, I pray that you'll just help us to turn towards you and look to you for our hope. Lord, that's where the hope comes from, is from you. Lord, I pray that you will just help us to turn toward you. If anyone here right now needs to come forward for prayer, to take a need that they've got, a burden that they have, and just give it to you, Father, the invitation is open for them to do so. If they need to come forward for prayer, the invitation is open for them. But Lord, may all of us purpose that whenever we hit trials and tribulations, we will not let the devil win, that we're going to make sure that you have the victory in our life, that we're going to let you fill us with strength and hope and joy and faith, and that we're going to just say to the devil, we are going to endure. We're going to pass this test, this trial, because we're servants of the Most High God. So, Father, we confess this. We ask this of you, Father. And now we ask this time of invitation. We pray that it'll be to your honor and glory alone. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. If you'll please stand.